James King will be speaking to us on abortion. James is the chairman of Young Republicans of Northeast Georgia, which is headquartered in Cleveland, Georgia, and serves the 9th Congressional District of Georgia. James graduated from Truett-McConnell University in May of 2019 with a Bachelor of Science in Music Education and is seeking a position at a local church to serve in the music ministry. James is also the author of 2 books about White County, Georgia, and began a podcast series, Freedomville, available on Spotify and other streaming services. James is an Eagle Scout, has previously served as the director of the first-year camper program for the Chattahoochee Council of the Boy Scouts of America, and is currently in the initial stages of creating a Trail Life USA troop in White County. James is currently single and available. Ladies, enjoys spending time drinking coffee while the sun rises and loves to cheer on the dogs every Saturday in the fall. Welcome, James.
I believe in a woman's right to choose whether or not to have sex. But once a woman chooses to have sex and a child is conceived, it is undeniably and uniquely human. See, according to the Mayo Clinic, when a sperm and an egg meet in the womb and conception occurs, you have what's called a zygote. And a zygote contains unique human DNA that is separate from the mother's, it's separate from the father's. It is undeniably human DNA. And a zygote is the very, very beginnings of a fetus. So from the beginnings of conception, there is undeniably a human being within the womb. And around 6 weeks of age, that child begins to develop a heartbeat. It develops a brain. It starts to develop a brain, and it starts to have its first neurological impulses while having a heartbeat. That's one reason that Georgia's heartbeat law was criticized by a lot of people, because it would restrict abortions at 6 weeks because of the presence of a heartbeat and neurological impulses. Now, the Webster Dictionary defines a lot of things as being necessary for the qualifications of life, but chief among them are the presence of a heartbeat. So, at 6 weeks of age, a fetus is undeniably a human being. Again, it's undeniably a human being from the time of conception, but it's undeniably a human being at 6 weeks of age, and it's undeniably living. It shows all of the signs of life at 6 weeks following conception. So to abort that child is to murder that child. It's no less than murder. And I propose that the pro-choice argument that says that this is a women's rights issue is in fact false. And even the claims that they use are false teachings as well. If this was a women's rights issue, then why aren't we exploring solutions to actually help women? Why aren't we talking about reforming the adoption system so that children can have a better future if a parent's not ready to have that child? Why aren't we talking about providing women with financial compensation to help with pregnancy costs? Why aren't we talking about giving them counseling if they need the emotional support? This is not a women's rights issue. This has always been a children's rights issue. Because in the womb, that is undeniably a child. And murdering that child does not help the woman in any way. It doesn't help anybody in any way. It harms the woman. It has health repercussions later on. The woman will be less likely to conceive in the future. The woman will likely struggle with emotional difficulties following that abortion. And so, again, this is not about supporting women. It's not about empowering women. It's about killing children. And other arguments used are that the quality of life of a child may not be good if he is allowed to be born. Well, who are we to determine the quality of life? Is anyone in this room psychic? Is anyone psychic? Because if you are, I don't believe in that stuff anyways, and believe that that's of the devil. But the point is, none of us can tell, no one can tell what's going to happen in the future. We can't determine what a child will be like. A child might be born with autism, but that autistic child could very well go on to become a doctor who saves dozens, if not hundreds of people in his career as a doctor. He could become a politician that produces bills, conservative bills to better our country. He could join the military and fight in this nation. A Down syndrome child, just because he has Down syndrome doesn't mean that his quality of life is non-existent. I can list dozens of Down children, people who I have known over the course of my lifetime who are now owners of businesses. I know a doctor who has Down syndrome. The point of the matter is, even though there are defects that somebody might have, there's still it's still not right to murder that person just because their quality of life may be impaired later on down the road. You know, in 2015, approximately 913,000 abortions were given across the U.S. according to the CDC. That's that's almost 1/5 of pregnancies that ended in abortion, according to the CDC. Now, a lot of times people will say that these abortions are the result of rape or incest. But according to the CDC, the combined amount of abortions for rape and incest is 0.5% for both. That's 0.3% for rape and 0.2% for incest. So statistically speaking, the abortions performed as a result of incest or rape are almost non-existent. 0.5%. But the pro-abortion lobby says that this is significant enough to make an argument of. You don't make policies based on a statistical anomaly. Again, this is solely about murder. And I'll tell you something else. Being pro-choice means being pro-murder. We've already established that to abort a child is no less than murder. And I have heard many people say that I would not abort a child, but who am I to say another woman can't? That's very wrong. It is. You're not making a neutral argument. There is no neutrality in this issue. Scripture says you're either for me or you stand against me, that he will spit out lukewarm Christians. And the same can be applied to any social issue out there. You can't take one stand. You can't be neutral in any social issue. You're always taking one stand or another, whether you intend to or not. So being pro-choice means you support a system that murders children. Since 1973, when Roe versus Wade was legalized, as of yesterday, according to the Abortion Counters organization, 61,595,204 children have been murdered in the womb. That's an entire nation's worth of kids. How many nations have populations less than that? If all of these kids had been allowed to be born and grown up, gotten minimum wage jobs, worked at McDonald's, forget becoming lawyers or doctors, just if they had been allowed to work at McDonald's, it is estimated by by a study conducted by the Wall Street Journal that these kids would have allowed for our country to be in a surplus of almost $3 trillion, assuming that spending remained the same. The fact of the matter is, murdering children does have huge repercussions for our society. Forget moral implications for a moment. Again, $3 trillion surplus that we could be living in right now if these kids had not been murdered. And the truth of the matter is, person who God sent to possibly find a cure to cancer, or to find a cure to any number of diseases, could very well have been aborted. We'll never know.
Well, let's get down to the nitty-gritty on one thing. There's an organization out there that's primarily responsible for, over the years, abortion becoming accepted and in fact becoming legal. That organization is Planned Parenthood. Let's look at Planned Parenthood. Who started Planned Parenthood? A woman by the name of Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger used to give a lot of speeches. One of the organizations she used to speak to a lot was called the, wait for it, Ku Klux Klan. Why? Because she wanted to make abortion legal to use against blacks. When you map out abortion clinics from Planned Parenthood, you will almost always find them in minority and poor areas. That's deliberate. That's not accidental.
You know, the irony of that is, and I read I read a study of this last year. In Georgia alone, since Roe versus Wade, more than 1 million black children have been aborted. Approximately 1.7 million black children have been aborted. So if voter demographics ring true, assuming they would continue to ring true had those children been allowed to be born, the irony is that Stacey Abrams probably would be our governor right now. She lost the election because of Democrat policies, and I find that very ironic.
Okay, thank you, Mr. King. Any questions from the audience? Okay, we have a question from online. How can you say a baby is living in the first trimester when it could not survive outside the womb?
Well, that's a very good question, and I struggled to answer that myself until my grandmother spent her last 3 months on this earth with a life support system. To answer that question, I think we have to look at my grandmother's situation, and the situation of nearly every American will struggle with having a family member or friend who, at some point in their life, needs to use a life support system. Are those people who are breathing on machines, are they no longer human beings? Are they no longer people? Do they deserve to have no rights because they can't breathe on their own? They still have a heartbeat. They have all the signs of life. So what's the difference between them and a child in the womb that also has all the same signs of life?
Let's take it one more step further. Let's look at modern medicine.
The issue is not that the child in the womb is dependent. The issue is all children for a very long time are dependent. If you leave a 6-month-old on somebody's doorstep, is that going to live because he's 6 months old, or 3 or 4? You know, they're all dependent. They're dependent on somebody else feeding them and housing them and everything else. So it's not just, life is very weak at either end. So whether it's an old person or a sick person or a baby, they're all dependent.
Or an unborn
So
person.
should we kill all of the people that cannot do things for themselves? It's absurd.
I can read one more here. Question for James. I read your bio, and I do not see where you are qualified to speak on abortion. Would you clear that up for us, or are you just another product of the patriarchy seeking to impose your will on women? Line things up.
Well, there's I hear two parts of that question, so I'll address them both separately. First of all, am I qualified to speak on abortion? I have been studying abortion since I entered into college. My freshman year of college, that's September in fact, so 5 years now. I've studied abortion and its effect on our society and on people who have abortions and the legitimacy of human beings inside of the womb. A friend of mine in high school had an abortion, and that's what kind of drew me into this subject. And as far as being qualified to speak on it, I would say that someone who science says should have been aborted would be able to speak on it. Is a survivor able to speak on an attack that they experienced? When my mother was pregnant with me, there were many doctors. There was multiple doctors that said she should have aborted me. And the truth of the matter is, under Georgia's heartbeat law, Mom could have aborted me even months into her pregnancy because of the complications that she had. But my mom recognized my unique life in her womb. She recognized that I was her child. I wasn't a fetus, I was a child. And she chose to let me live, even though it did put her life at great risk. She almost died so that I could live. So yeah, I think I'm qualified to speak on this issue. As far as the second part, can you read that again, please?
Would you, or are you just another product of the patriarchy seeking to impose your will on women?
Well, first of all, patriarchy implies father. I'm not a father. I haven't had kids yet. But nobody up here, nobody who is giving a pro-life argument is seeking to impose our will on women. That's not the argument. Our stance is to defend the lives of children. A child in the womb is just that, a child. Even though it's in the womb, it is still a child, unique and an individual. DNA testing will prove that its DNA is unique and separate from that of the mother and of the father. It is its own body living inside of the mother. We're not trying to impose our will on women. As I said before, I support a woman's right to choose whether or not to have sex. But the minute you make that choice, you're no longer just yourself if you have a child. We're talking about two separate beings here. And that's what a lot of people can't understand. This argument is not limited to just one person. It's two people that this argument is about. Nobody's trying to impose our will on. We're all trying to defend children.
Question, now, what if the child in the womb is a woman? Would that be okay for a patriarch to be on the side of abortion or life?
Well, I believe that every child is unique and has the right to live. The Declaration of Independence says that all men are created by, or all men are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Chief among these, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life being fundamental to the first of those three unalienable rights we have. Liberty, a child's right to be born, the freedom to be born and to exist. The pursuit of happiness, something that none of us should be able to take away.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions or comments?